Yes, ma'am. But, hang on.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead.
Councilman, wait. We're going to take you live in 5 seconds. And now in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the first meeting of the Police Chief Selection Committee. At this time, we're going to hear from our Mayor President, who's going to give us some direction and make some introductions. Mayor President, Sharon Weston Broom.
Thank you very much. It is with great gratitude that I am thankful to each and every one of you all to heeding the call to serve on the Police Chief Committee. Many of you all have been on this committee before, and I thought it would certainly add value to ask several of you to join this experience once again. Before I get into the specifics of the meeting, I want to acknowledge where the city is with respect to safety, crime, and law enforcement. Of course, making Baton Rouge safer is a top priority for me. And following the spikes in violent crime that we saw during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm happy to say that we are experiencing the second year in a row with more than a 20% reduction in homicides. Safety should never be a privilege. It's a fundamental right that every resident deserves. And so today I can't help but reflect on the values and principles that have guided our community's pursuit of safety and justice since 2017. The journey started back in 2017 when we aimed at making Baton Rouge a place where every resident, regardless of the color of their skin, their gender, or zip code, could live in a safe and secure community. Tonight marks the first organizational meeting of the Police Chief Committee, a group of dedicated individuals, including important community figures who will help as your Mayor President selects the next chief of the Baton Rouge Police Department. Back in 2017, we recognized the importance of transparency, the importance of community involvement, and a diverse group of individuals like yourselves work together to help make informed decisions. It was a time that we believed in the power of these principles, and we still do. Our community has been on a journey of healing and reconciliation since the tragic summer of 2016. Those wounds were recently reopened with additional investigations into the police department. We must build back the mutual trust and respect that we have worked so hard to achieve over the last 5 years. It is during times like this that we recognize the inseparable connection between peace and justice. We understood then, as we do now, that choosing the next police chief is a decision that requires serious collaboration. It's essential to build upon the mutual trust and respect that we've worked so hard to achieve, because no policing model or police chief can succeed without it. The Chief of Police oversees nearly 600 men and women who are sworn to protect and serve our fellow residents. Our community consists of many dedicated officers, and I continuously thank them for their tireless service. But we also recognize that there will always be opportunities for progress within the Baton Rouge Police Department. And it's our responsibility to ensure that our policies and procedures align with national best practices and standards to benefit both law enforcement and the community. To put it simply, the city of Baton Rouge deserves a police force that consistently collaborates with communities and partnering law enforcement agencies to strengthen trust and true collaboration while continuing to reduce crime. Throughout my administration, we have made significant investments in new training, and we have worked to provide officers with the best equipment and technology available. We have set higher standards for professionalism, accountability, and transparency. These principles form the foundation of public service, and our upcoming police chief must be prepared to continue the reforms that began under Chief Murphy Paul. Reforms that have embraced national best practices and won national recognition for our police department. I would like to reiterate that we have great officers within our force, and police reform is not a rejection of our dedicated officers. Instead, it is a commitment to continuous improvement. We've made significant strides updating use of force policies and ensuring that all officers are equipped with body cameras. Community policing and collaboration have continued to be at the forefront of our efforts as city parish workers and community members work together to reduce blight, invest in new crime fighting technology, and focus on improved relationships with our neighborhoods most affected by violence. We have 21 candidates seeking to be the next chief of police. Your task as members of this committee is to diligently review their applications, interview the candidates, and send me a list of the top 5 individuals that you deem acceptable to assume the role. I must emphasize the importance of objectivity and an acute awareness of the vital role that the police chief plays in our community. It's imperative to consider the needs of our community and commit to supporting the next police chief, no matter who they are. When evaluating these candidates, consider their experience, their capacity for forward thinking and open-mindedness. Assess whether they will promote transparency and integrity, and understand how to implement a 21st century model of policing that includes community policing at its core. Consider their appreciation for the role of data in the department and their vision for excellence, one that is both bold and challenging. As we move forward, let's remember the values and principles that have guided us from 2017 to today. We are committed to creating a safer, more inclusive Baton Rouge for all its residents. Your dedication to this endeavor is essential, and I have every confidence that we will succeed in this important mission. Thank you for your service, commitment, and let's get to work. Mayor Pro Tem Cole, I thank you for assuming the role of chairing this commission, and your Vice Chair, Jennifer Carwile. And I want to say to each and every one of you, Walt Green, Drake Brinknack, Kathy Victorian, Mike McClanahan, Tommy Gibson, Charles DeGravier, Eugene Collins, and Jessica Matthews, thank you so much for investing your time in this very, very critical issue around policing in selecting the next chief of police. I know all of you all have your own roles and responsibilities, but to volunteer and be willing to serve speaks volumes as it relates to your commitment to this community. So with that being said, I know that this is the organizational meeting and that you have recently received, you will receive. We have binders. And Dante Bidwell, Chief of Staff, why don't you come up now and share the next step with the binders? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you all for being here. Thank y'all so much. We've been holding on to these until the first meeting because we wanted to make sure that Mayor had a chance to address the group, address the committee, and really put forward the charge. So in a moment, we're going to hand out all of these binders, which includes every person who passed the civil service exams, applications, as well as resumes. There's information about specialized training and education, everything that you could kind of gather from a person on paper. But after this meeting, we're going to start bringing these folks here in front of you so that you can hear from their own mouths what you can't get off paper, right? So as we move forward, we're bringing folks in for in-person interviews and presentations. I want to just stress, to the mayor's point, the gravity of what we're undertaking. And again, thank you all for being here. So we'll be handing these out momentarily.
Councilman, I'll be glad to take any questions if any of the committee members have any.
Since I've been here for a while doing this job, we're going to have to do this like a council meeting. We don't have the screen for you to push the button to speak, but if you want to speak, raise your hand and I'll acknowledge you, and then we'll go from there. Ms. Caldwell.
I was on the committee the last time, and I know we submitted questions, and then we all were kind of assigned a question so that we were sure to ask the same questions to each candidate. Are we doing that again this time?
I believe that process was worked very well, and I would encourage the same process.
Okay.
Anyone else? Mr. Collins? Okay. Well, Mayor, first let me say thank you for the opportunity to serve on this committee again. Thanks for selecting me. And I want to thank all of you for your service to do so. I think the task of selecting the next chief of police is one we shouldn't take lightly. And think about a process that is fair, that is transparent, that we can be proud of in terms of what the community can participate in. Hear the conversation, hear the questions that are asked, and hear the presentations from the candidates who have offered themselves up for service. And so with that being said, I think we should open the discussion as to how we're going to proceed, when we're going to start interviewing candidates, how many candidates we're going to interview per day. Mayor has given us the charge of selecting 5 candidates to submit to her. And so I think we have to think very carefully about the process we want to use. Does that mean we look at all of the candidates right now and narrow down to those we're going to interview? Look at the candidates and then discuss their qualifications, their experience, some of the roles they've served in, how many men and or women they've been able to supervise during their career, and whether or not we feel those candidates on paper meet the need of what we want to see in the next police chief here in the city of Baton Rouge. Or does it mean we interview all 21 candidates? I'm open to suggestions. Mayor, I think we'll take some direction from you in terms of what your pleasure would be. But I think we need to have a very, very fair and transparent process. And again, I'm not opposed to us narrowing down the 21 to a number we're going to interview. I just want to make sure whatever we do, that we have to use the process of voting, we can. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 on the committee. I know we have 2 alternates, but I think
We have 3 alternates.
We have 3 alternates, so there are 11 people total, right?
10.
Say it again?
It's 10 people.
10 people with 3 alternates, so 7 who are actually on the committee.
Yeah.
So of the
And the
individuals-
alternates will be at all the committee meetings as
Got it.
well.
So for today's purpose, I think all 10 of us should have a vote in terms of what we decide. Ms. Victoria, you want to ask a question?
No, I basically, is it on? Hello.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, again, echo what you said about thanking the mayor for selecting me to be on this committee. It's a very important role that the chief of police plays in our parish, and I would just say that what's on paper, I hope we just are able to come together collectively and pick the best person to serve East Baton Rouge Parish in that role.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, I would like to reiterate the dates of the meetings, the 17th, the 23rd, the 26th, and November 1st.
We're supposed to have those names submitted to you by the 1st.
That's the goal.
That's the goal. All right.
I will say that looking at the list of candidates, we might have to add another date on that. But right now, I believe we can make it through with those 4 dates.
Gotcha. Well, good. Dante, Ms. Caldwell does not have a binder. According, I see you're here. Are there any legal instructions that you need to give us relative to what I just talked about? Can we narrow the list down to those we just want to interview? Can we do that, or do we have to interview all 21 candidates?
Well, I'm assuming you're the.
Yes.
chair. Okay. I think Ms. Chambers just pointed out that the roll was not called, so make sure to do that. And
Oh, I thought Ms. Mayor President did that when she called out everybody's name. But we can call roll. We'll start over here. Walt, if you don't mind. There you go.
President Mike McClanahan.
President Lamont Cole.
Present Jennifer Carwile.
President Eugene Collins.
All 10 members and all 10 members are here.
thank you, Chairman. I just want to remind everybody, because this is being aired to the public, make sure your microphones are on. Otherwise, the public or whoever's watching won't be able to hear you. If you don't know how to work your microphone, Councilman Cole will definitely show you which button to press.
So you got answer for me on that question, Courtney?
Repeat that for me,
The
Councilman.
question was, do we have to interview all 21 candidates, or can we narrow it down to a number we are going to interview?
If you don't mind, I'm going to ask our personnel attorney that. Well, if I step on the side, I'll ask her that to get some confirmation on that. Other than that, are there any other, because I know I'm on the agenda to talk about protocols for the meeting.
Oh, go ahead and do that now.
Okay, so just very quickly, y'all couldn't have had a better chairman. He's probably more familiar with the protocols than I am, because he's Mayor Pro Tem. And so the protocols of the meeting are just gonna follow the basics of Robert Rules of Order. If you're not familiar with that, the basics are just what you usually see happen with council meetings. I'm talking about y'all speaking into microphone. I need to do the same. So, a motion can be made by someone. I'm not sure how this is going to flow. The Chairman Cole, is going to recognize the motion, probably repeat it, so that everybody has understood and heard it. We'll take a vote on that. I don't think that you all are going to have use of the screens for the vote. I don't think it'll be that, but usually what they do is once the vote is called, there's usually a roll call of who is voting what. If there might be some other things that come up in the meantime, such as reconsiderations and things of that nature, I don't know that y'all are going to get that into it. It'll probably be very basics as far as the Robert Rules of Order are concerned. But if anybody has any questions about it, I think I see some familiar faces, so some of you all are already familiar with how, these kind of things are dealt with. But do you have any other questions, Chairman? Other than that, I'm going to get that answer for you.
No, ma'am, I don't have any questions. Does anybody in the committee have any questions? Go ahead.
Mayor, I'm interested in your deadline, and is that pretty hard in your mind that we need to wrap it up by the end of the month?
That is my goal because of the imminent departure of Chief Paul. But I believe that if you feel the need to have a more extensive process to add some additional dates, I believe all of that can be worked out. I will still be in my 60-day mode. So that is one of the major issues that we're faced with. And we do have time as it relates to the 60 days.
Thank you.
But I'm more concerned about thoroughness in this process. I don't want to, I don't want it to be a rushed process. I want it to be a thorough, thoughtful process.
Ms. Victoria?
Mayor Pro Tem, the press release that went out on the 11th, it states that we will, the committee will review the candidates' application packet, interview candidates, and recommend 5. So is that the mayor asking us to interview all 21?
Well, I think, well, Mayor Broom, you answer that question.
Well, I would be surprised if the candidates did not want to interview. The last time in the process, we had applicants who said they didn't want to interview.
Right.
But the very fact that most of these candidates have supplied us with information, their applications and their resumes says to me that they're interested in being interviewed. So I will say it would probably be advantageous to go down that road and allow them an opportunity to be interviewed.
So I think first, if we are going to interview every candidate, we need to talk about how many we want to interview per day. I think 30 minutes per interview has been suggested. And then, of course, I know throughout that time, we'll probably need a break in between. So we're talking about perhaps 40 minutes per interview if we were to take a 10-minute break in between. So how many do you all want to do per day? That could be 3, 5, 7. I'm open. I serve at the pleasure. And I think just a little bit to talk about the last experience. One of the concerns came up last time was candidates having the questions prior to being interviewed. And before we started the process, we wanted to keep that out of the hands of candidates. But again, this is being televised. So as soon as the first candidate interviews, everyone will have access to the questions. And then at that point, we have to ask all candidates the same question. The only person in that process who seems to have an unfair experience is the first candidate. So I would suggest that we decide on the questions and make sure all candidates have the questions the day before the first interview, just to be fair to the first candidates who interview. Because I think it's unfair for the first few candidates to not have the questions prior to, and then every candidate afterward to have the questions prior to. I think it gives them an advantage in terms of knowing what they're going to be asked and then prepare the answers and prepare their answers. And so I think we ought to, as best we can, give every candidate the same advantage of having the questions prior to being interviewed. And again, if they, prepare, coming in and do your very best. That's what we want to see. Prepare good answers. Those who are going to do a good job are going to do a good job regardless, and those who won't, need a little bit more support, a little bit more time in the position they're currently serving in. Go ahead, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem, I would like to add this commentary, and that is because this is a public meeting, you may have citizens who will come up with questions that they would like to present to the candidates or have you all vet to the candidates. So I believe that gives another level of additional comments with questions that may arise from citizens who participate. And based on your last experience, I do think that there was commentary and there might have been a few questions that some of the citizens had from the audience.
Well, I think the last experience we had an email set up where citizens could send in questions to that email. And then once we received all of the questions from the email, we then developed the questions from citizens and our own. And then we put together the questions.
That's not what in my memory, I thought people were able to come up to the podium and ask questions, but I've been to so many Metro Council meetings, I might be just blending that in my head. I think, though, that...
Paul, do you remember?
I believe that we did have the questions sent in, but I do remember citizens also making comments at the end of that evening.
Yeah, I think they made comments.
Okay.
I don't think they ask actual questions, because we had to ask every candidate the same exact question. I think they made comments, and I think in the second round, we allowed candidates to respond to some of the comments that were made in the second round. Because I think we had 2 rounds of applications last time. So just offering up previous experience. Courtney, look like you dying to say something over there. Oh,
Particularly,
okay. Oh, go ahead.
So the personnel attorney in our office did respond and said you all are not required to interview all of them. And I have some other questions about, comments about the protocol, but if.
Go ahead.
Okay. I just want to make sure also, since this is a public meeting, you all are going to be held to the standard of open meetings law under the state statute. Just briefly, is someone here to take minutes? Chairman, is someone taking minutes? And that's Ms. Chambers? Okay. So Ms. Chambers taking minutes. It's a 10-member. Okay. So you all will.
7 active, 3 alternates though.
3 alternates? Okay.
But the 3 alternates are going to be here for every meeting.
Okay. Okay. So if the 3 alternates are going to be here for every meeting, then you make sure your quorum number is based on who is present.
Based on who's present or active?
Well, based on who is going to be sitting and voting if you make a motion.
Got you. So it'll be the 7 members. We'll keep that number 7.
Okay. Yeah.
And the quorum of the 7 will be 4, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. So just make sure you abide by that. I know that it looks like everybody's sitting up here. So you want to be mindful of that, of your quorum number. And then I think you all kind of hit on comments. Usually at the Metro Council meetings, comments are taken after the motion has been made. I'm not sure how you all want to do that, but just be mindful that if the public is here and they want to make comments at some point in time, you want to allow them to make comments either prior to you all taking action on a motion, or it sounds like at some point comments were made last time afterwards. I'm not sure.
Comments were made after each candidate
Okay.
was interviewed.
So I would say, based on our last experience, we didn't have a whole lot of motions.
Right.
It was just after they did the interview process that the citizens were able to come up for public comment. Yeah, and those comments were taken under advisement.
Got it. So based on all that you have heard, are there any questions or suggestions? My suggestion immediately would be that we ask our IT department to establish an email so the general public can submit questions they may want to see us ask prior to the 23rd, which is going to be Monday of next week. And then during that time, we can look at those questions. And then we need to add another date, Mayor, in between the 23rd. If we're going to actually start interviews on the 23rd, we need to add a date for the submission of the actual questions. That doesn't necessarily mean that the committee needs to meet, but it does mean that we need to have a date to submit those questions and then compile what questions we're going to ask so that all of us know what questions are going to be asked. And then if we are going to inform the candidates of those questions, that they can get those questions on the 22nd. I do suggest we go in alphabetical order. That's the easiest way. And the candidates have been submitted to us in alphabetical order. And so we can go that way. I think we've made a decision that we're going to interview all 21. Is that correct? We're going to interview all 21 candidates. 30 minutes per candidate. Have we decided on how many candidates per day? Say again? The 23rd is when we're going to start the interviews.
Is there a beginning time for the meeting and the ending?
Yes, that time is indicated on every date has a specific time. Some are 4 o'clock, 1 or 2, maybe 5 o'clock.
Correct. So
But
Monday
all of
we're
that
gonna-
information also, will be posted for the public, and it has been sent out already publicly, so to the press. So all of those dates that we've established and the times are listed, and we can revisit those with you all as well.
Where is Eric Romero here?
No, but I will talk to Eric Romero about establishing that. I think we can get up a email system. Certainly today is Tuesday. We can certainly do that, I would believe, no later than Friday.
Okay.
And we can also post that information as well.
And so we'll take emails. Mayor, see if Eric can do that by Friday morning, and we can
Absolutely.
take emails all day on Friday, and perhaps we can, we then or you all can submit your questions to me by Sunday afternoon, maybe, and then we can share those with the candidates on Monday morning. And then those first candidates will have all day Monday prior to coming here at 4:00 p.m. And then we'll take the first candidate, which will be Darren Ahmed, at 4:00 on Monday afternoon, October 23rd. In addition to that, I think we still need to talk. So we would be looking at taking one candidate, 1.5 candidate per hour. I guess if we start at 4, we take a candidate for 30 minutes, or do we take 2 candidates, then a break, then another 2, then a break? It's up to you all. Go ahead, Ms. Victoria.
I think 2 and a break would be great.
All right, so an hour. We'll interview for an hour, and then we'll take a break. And then we'll interview for another hour and take a break. And is that enough for one night, or do we interview for 3 hours and be done for the first night?
If we're doing 3 dates and we have 21 candidates, we have to do 7 a day.
Correct. Unless we add another date.
And then if we're allowing public comment, that's our 30 minutes plus 10 minutes of public comment, or what are we?
We can do the public comment at the end of all the interviews, or we can do public comment at the end of each interview. I think we do public comment at the end of all interviews. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, sorry to slow the process a bit here, but before we, and we may have already agreed to interview everybody, but before we agree to interview everybody, I thought, and this is a question too for the legal folks here, I would like to see the discipline records and the IA files that might exist before we decide to interview everybody.
I believe that's doable.
Okay. And how soon can we get that information? Question, all of these candidates are internal, correct? So all of these candidates currently work for BRPD, or do we have any who?
Some are, I know the first guy's from Central, I think.
Darren Ahmed?
No, he works.
Nah, he works for BRPD.
So we do have candidates who are not internal candidates, which means, I don't know if you're going alphabetically, we may have to get some additional information on their files. So I would advise that you can start alphabetically, and we can certainly, between now and Monday, get additional information on those external candidates and look at the list that is existing. Also, I wanted to share that the next meeting on the 23rd starts at 5. The next meeting on the 26th is at 5, and November the 1st is at 4 p.m. And certainly if you take 7 individuals a day, and in all due respect, Mayor Pro Tem, you may find that you may want to cut that 30 minutes down in terms of the interview process once it gets started. But, I mean, you can certainly do what you feel is best to have a thorough interview.
I think it's going to depend on the number of questions we agree we're going to ask.
Yeah.
I think it'll depend on that in terms of the amount of time we take. I think we definitely don't want to go more than 30 minutes. But the questions are going to drive how long we give each candidate, if everybody thinks that's appropriate.
And as I said, we can certainly add we're not prohibited from adding another date. We'll make that date public just as we've made the rest of these dates public.
So if we agree we're going to do 7 a day, that means the first 7 candidates are going to be D. Ahmed, T. Ballard, U. Claudia, M. Daniel, A. Davis, S. Douglas, and T. Glover. That would be the first 7. You got that, Mike? First 7. I'm just making sure they know
A.
that they,
Davis lives in Arlington, Tennessee, it looks like, so it might take longer to get that person's records if we're looking.
to have them prior to the interview.
It shouldn't take too long.
No, okay.
They ought to be able to be here Monday, and we ought to be able to have the records Monday. You know how to get a public records request, don't you? Yes, sir. So those are the candidates, and I think it's important. Mayor Broom, who's going to be responsible for notifying these 7 candidates that they are scheduled to be interviewed next Monday evening?
My assigned staff to this project are Attorney Leslie Chambers, the ACAO, and Chief of Staff Dante Bidwell. So the 2 of them are responsible.
Mr. Bidwell, Ms. Chambers, did you hear the first 7 names are going to be interviewed beginning Monday at 5:00 p.m.? Yeah. D. Ahmed, I think it's, let me go to this, pronounce all the names. Darren Ahmed, Timothy Ballard, William Claudia, say it again? Oh, Clarita, I'm sorry, William Clarita the third, actually. Myron Daniels, Sharon Douglas, and Thomas Glover. Those are the first 7.
A. Davis.
A. Davis is there? Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that one. Oh, Alvin Davis. Alvin Davis. He is the candidate that lives in Arlington. Is that Tennessee? Arlington, Tennessee. So let me state that again for the folks at home. Darren Ahmed, Timothy Ballard, William Clarita III, Myron Daniels, Alvin Davis, Sharon Douglas, and then Thomas Glover. Those are the first 7 candidates that we're going to interview at 5:00 on Monday afternoon. That's number 1. Number 2, the general public will be able to submit questions Friday morning, let's say at 10 a.m. They can submit questions. We'll make that email address available. Mr. Bidwell, you got something for us?
Yeah, so we're actually communicating.
Speaking to the microphone.
We're communicating with IS Director Eric Romero right now to establish that. We hope by first thing tomorrow morning we should have that up and running. And actually, we can have folks submitting public comments beginning, say, 9 a.m. tomorrow until Friday, which will give everybody a chance to actually review what's submitted. So by Monday, we come in the door and we know what we're going to do.
So we're saying by 10 a.m. tomorrow, the public can begin to send emails and public comments?
Correct.
So we're looking for questions relative to those we're going to ask the candidates, and then comments about the process and/or candidates. You can send both to that email.
So the one that they're establishing right now, and I can tell you, BRPD Chief Questions at brla.gov.
Look at
So just to spell it out, BRPD CHIEF QUESTIONS at brla.gov. And again, we hope to have that live shortly. But we would ask that folks can begin submitting public comments and questions by 9 a.m. tomorrow morning at the latest.
I like 10. 10 is a good round number.
Yes,
5
sir.
and 5. We've got 10 people on the committee. 10 people on the committee. 10 a.m. sounds good.
Yes,
Did
sir.
all our people in the media get the email address in the media? Did y'all get the email address? Spell it right on television tonight. Now, come on now.
And that's why I want to make sure I
the public
spell
is
it.
able to get the information and send the questions and things of that nature.
And they need to be submitted by,
We like to, now that the day has moved up 2 days, at the pleasure of the committee, when would you all like to see the questions so we can begin compiling them? When would you like to cut the deadline? Maybe 3 o'clock Friday afternoon? Is that okay with everyone?
Mm-hmm.
3 o'clock Friday afternoon, and then Mr. Bill will make sure we all get the suggested questions. And then I would ask you all to submit your questions by Monday morning at 7 a.m.
but if our first person is Monday afternoon, we need to know the questions to send them out by Sunday.
No, we're going to send them to the candidates Sunday morning. Monday morning, but go ahead. What's your suggestion?
I think we need to figure out how many questions in total we're asking. If we're all asking one of ours and if we're all asking a question, or are we not taking our own questions and taking, because that's 7 questions. If we give them 3 minutes, that's 21 minutes. I'm getting mathy here, and I'm an artist. That's not a good combination. But I guess my question is, how many comments are we, or how many questions are we taking in total?
Anybody's suggestion?
You mean per candidate?
Yeah, I mean, we're asking the same questions to everybody. So are we asking 7 questions, 1 from each of us, plus 3 more that we get from the public?
In all fairness, I think the 7 select should be able to ask each candidate 1 question.
Right.
Yeah.
But is that it then? But if we're asking for questions from the public as well, how many extra questions, how many public
My
questions?
question may be from the public.
Okay.
My question may not be my question.
Okay.
So I'm thinking we'll get together and have those questions at hand to make sure that we are fairly asking the questions of the public and the questions of ours and others that may have input.
My guess is that there'll be some duplications when we get to questions, so somebody's going to have to sort through it, excuse me, and decide what the final questions are.
So I'm hoping Mr. Bidwell.
Yeah, our team will do that. They'll look at the questions and then sort through to make sure there are no duplicates in the process.
And also, 30 minutes is not a long time. That time will fly. And so we want to make sure we give each candidate ample time so that one will not feel like he's been cheated of a minute or two, because that minute or 2 minutes could make a difference.
Well, previous experience, we gave each candidate a minimum amount of time to answer the question, or a maximum amount of time to answer the question, and then we kept the clock on them and told them, if they had 3 minutes to answer each question or 2 minutes to answer each question, they could go. And then as the time was running short, they could see it up there on the screen as to how much time they had to answer each question. That way, each candidate didn't go, some candidates didn't elaborate more on one question than the other. So they were given an amount of time. So I think once we determine the number of questions we're going to ask, we then set a time frame for how much time each candidate has to answer each question.
So mine's sort of a 2-part question. The first is generally, what is the nature of our responsibility as alternates in terms of putting forward questions and participating on the committee? Because that leads into a question I had related to questions, where is the idea to have a set of general questions from us and the public that each candidate is asked and that's it? Or is there a possibility to ask candidate-specific questions as well, and would those be pre-made or occur in the moment? For example, Deputy Chief Daniels, I'm sure, would be getting very different questions from the individuals who work for private companies, and those may come up in the moment and wouldn't need to be asked to everybody.
That's a very good question. First, I'll talk about the alternates. The rationale behind the alternates was that to make sure that, for example, if one of you all had another commitment of the 7, that we would maintain the 7 number. But because you all have committed as alternates to be here, we certainly value your input as well in the process. But it had to do with making sure we had continuity in terms of insight and knowing the process and what has happened and being able to step in case someone else is not here. Your second question about in the moment, while I do think that we have to have established protocols, I think we would do ourselves a disservice if we did not have an organic process as well. So if there's a question that comes up that you feel compelled to ask, that you would think would be vital to getting the answers that we need to decide a candidate, then I would say, Mr. Chairman, that they should have that flexibility as well.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, Just to, again, kind of push back on interviewing every candidate. One, I think we might see some things in the IA files that we just, hey, we know for a fact we're not going with this guy or this woman. And I wouldn't want to waste their time, right? Another piece, I think of this, and Mayor, this might put more work on your team, if any of these officers are involved in active litigation. And if they are, do we have any access to the discovery to see why? I think those are all factors that might exclude a candidate, and we just kept him here for him or her here for 30 minutes. I wouldn't want to waste anybody's time, and we know that they have this piece hanging over their head, and we're just not going to consider them, if that makes sense.
Okay. Our attorney has, parish attorney has some additional insight on that.
Gordon.
To address the issue regarding getting their records and IA files, because you all are subject to abiding by the open meeting laws, where personnel records are concerned, you have to, well, first let me say it's advised by our office that you get written approval from the candidates to give them the option of whether or not they want that information disclosed in public or in private. If it's to be disclosed in private, then it's going to be done via executive session. And so make sure for the next couple of meetings, I don't know who's doing the agenda, that it's noted that there might be executive session held for the purposes of discussing, and I'll give that some exact language to the person who's drafting the agenda. But the reason for that is because, generally speaking, when you're talking about a person's personnel records or their IA files in this case, you're talking about character, the possibility of discussing character competency and physical or mental health issues. And so that's why that information, that person may not want that information disclosed, but they have an option to do that. That's their option to give. And they may not want to give it at all, and then you all will have to make a decision based on that. But if they do say, okay, I'm fine with you all having my personnel record and my IA files, then they need to let you all know whether or not they don't mind it being disclosed in public, or if they want it to be disclosed in private. And again, if it's done in private, it will be done in executive session. When you are discussing someone's personnel records or, their IA files, that leans into their character, their competency, mental health, and physical issues. They have to be given written notice under the law 24 hours in advance of that meeting. And so I think it was brought up earlier whether or not there would be sufficient time for the candidates that are out of state. That needs to be given some consideration, that time delay. We have to give them written notice. They have to tell us whether or not they want it disclosed. And then if they say yes, then it's just going to be a process of them getting that information to the committee. And so I know that was a good bit of information. If there's anything that somebody wants me to repeat, I don't mind doing that. But we do have to pay attention to that under the law.
Mr. Gibson, then Mr. Walt.
You mentioned personnel files, mental health, and so forth, but specifically with disciplinary records. Just to make it plain, if somebody's been disciplined for 30 days for excessive force, I'm not interested in interviewing. Or if they've been fired from a department and it's public record. I understand all the other things you said, but I think when it was brought up about disciplinary. Does disciplinary, does that fit in the same category as the other information you said?
I believe it does. It's going to be in their personnel files. But our personnel attorney is actually watching this as we speak, so she's texting me as we go. And please be mindful of this. There cannot be any deliberation at all outside of this public meeting. And so as you're discussing right now, Mr. Tommy, about, deciding whether or not you're going to interview somebody, that level of discussion is going to have to happen in this forum.
Well, some of these departments are expunging disciplinary files.
I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once she responds to me, I'll get back up to the microphone. Does anybody have any other questions, though, about that part of the process?
I do, if I may. Certainly see the past and the closed instances of investigations with IA will certainly be reviewable, but is it permissible for us to review open IA investigations? Is this part of the body? I just want to make sure that we can.
Yes, I believe so. Now, there may be some redactions. Know that too. Even though the files will be available for viewing, if they are available for viewing, and I'll find that out specifically. Sometimes those files come with redactions, so you may not see everything.
And my only thought was, since it's an open file, there's been no adjudication or no findings if it's been open, so that was my concern.
I can't.
Providing that information to us. But if you say it's okay, it's wonderful, we can see it. But I just want to make sure that was clear.
So Mr. Dawson just informed me that it will apply, that will apply your ability to see anything to the closed files, not anything that's currently undergoing any kind of investigation.
Mayor Pro Tem, and I'm sorry to add something else to your list, right? But I would like to see any letters of recommendation that were made when they were hired, if it's possible.
You said when they were hired?
Yeah.
Okay. When they were hired with the department that they're with right now.
Every officer would have to get letters of recommendation from somebody.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. So this is the response that I've got from our personnel attorney, Ms. Dawn Gilliard. It is public if someone was disciplined for a certain amount of days. The entire file may not be public because of the details. They can review all the documents of everyone before and then decide who they want to interview. So is that helpful at all? You can review the documents before you decide who you want to interview.
And how will we have access to that information?
Well, let me find that out. Usually when we have that kind of information, sometimes we bring it and make it available for viewing in our office. But I'll get the logistics of that and let you all know.
So we're back to my original question. Are we saying we want to review all of this information and then determine whether or not we're going to interview all 21
Yes.
candidates? All right, so let's start there. Let's review the information if at all possible. I think, Courtney, if you can let us know how soon we're able to see that information. If, Mr. Dotson, you say that we can come to your office and review the information, that will give us a little bit of flexibility in terms of when we can come in.
I'm not saying I'm offering up our office. I want to say that for the benefit of dealing with my supervisor.
Yes.
I just said sometimes, as an example, we do.
We do. And look, and Ms. Humphrey is correct, and thank you to her for the job she's doing. I appreciate it. We don't have a problem with doing anything we can to assist the mayor with this process, and if that means that we can open, we have a very big conference room that we can open, that we can make available for y'all to come and review certain materials. I just want to make clear that for anyone who's outside of our jurisdiction, outside of BRPD, we cannot guarantee that we can get any information in any time frame. Anyone that's been familiar with public records requests understands everybody has their own protocol and their procedures for the way that they release information. And so we'll have to, on behalf of the mayor and administration, make a request for that information from Tennessee or from wherever the outside agency is and hope to get the information as soon as we can. We will, of course, let them know that it's an expedited consideration, but we can't guarantee that we get them in any kind of time frame, but we'll do our best to get that additional information.
So, committee members, do we want to say by Friday afternoon we should have an opportunity to come to this building and review that information and then talk about which candidates we want to interview or not?
Yes.
And set the time by Friday afternoon. What's the latest on Friday we could come see that information, Mr. Dawson?
I'm going to get, Courtney and I will get with, Ms. Humphrey and I will get with Dealey Morris, who's the Baton Rouge Police Department legal advisor from my office, and to ascertain how long it would take us to get the information we know we could put our hands on. I'm hopeful that we should be able to get it fairly quickly. Today is Tuesday. I'm hopeful we should be able to get it within the next couple of days that will facilitate y'all being able to come on Friday. We will keep in contact with you and all the committee members, and hopefully first thing Friday morning when we open at 8 o'clock, people can start rotating in to come in. What we have to be mindful of is that in theory we can't have any more than Three of y'all, we would like no more than 2 or 3 y'all in the conference room at the same time, because if we have more than 3 of y'all, it could be considered to be some sort of public office, open meeting in violation of open meeting law. So we don't want that to happen.
The quorum for us is 4, so.
Yeah, but we always go below that. You know that.
Yes,
so
sir.
we go as far below that as we can. So in our eye, if the quorum is 4, we don't want more than 2. At the max 3 y'all in there at the same time.
2.5.
So don't worry about that. It's not up for y'all to worry about that. If y'all come in and it's 3 people, we'll take one by person, put them in another room, or we'll do something else to separate y'all. I don't want that to make y'all have to figure out or call each other to see who's coming. But I just want to let y'all know if we see, you see us doing that, that's the reason why.
Well,
Not trying to separate you or anything of that nature, but that's the reason why.
Mr. Chairman, given what we're talking about here about shortening the list, does that mean that the 7 that we've called out may or may not be the first?
Correct. Scratch
correct.
that. They may not be the first 7. How much time do we need to give them prior to interviewing? Friday afternoon, it should be enough time?
Well, they'll, if I may, they will certainly be notified tonight. What time is it? It's 5? Is it 6?
Well, we're saying we
First
may not
thing in the
interview
morning.
some.
But let me just add this. As I heard the commentary on looking at the files, et cetera, I would recommend, certainly up to you all, that perhaps those individuals who are out of town be put at the end of the agenda
That
for
works.
interviews.
That works as well. And listen, to your question, Eugene, I'm sure the candidates we can ask them to authorize the release of that information sooner rather than later if that helps. And, they may be able to assist in expediting the release of that information for those candidates who are outside of BRPD.
You want to talk about this?
Mayor Pro Tem, you're correct. That may have facilitated, but again, I don't know what the protocol is of that particular agency. But by all means, that may assist us, and if that's needed, then we'll contact that particular candidate and ask them to contact the agency and ask them to be released. So that's a definite consideration. Yes, sir.
Awesome. So I think this is where we are. Before we identify who the candidates are going to be in terms of who's up first, we're going to review any of the personnel records so we can determine whether or not the candidate is worthy of being interviewed by this committee. And then we'll interview local candidates first. And then we'll let those who live outside of Baton Rouge or who live outside of the state of Louisiana, that they're going to be interviewed last. So that'll give them at least a week and a half to make travel arrangements if, in fact, they're selected to be interviewed. That work for everyone? Mr. Gibson?
Are we still giving the waiver, whether on the personnel information? Are we still sending that out?
Yes, sir.
So now are we distinguishing between the personnel records that they must waive and the public records that we could get by public request without a waiver? Are we distinguishing between the two? Because if it's public records and it's been in the newspaper somewhere and everything, and, we should be able to have that without them giving permission for us to get that information.
Yes, the idea behind that, yes, sir. That does make sense.
Okay.
But I think that if it's a part of their personnel record, let me ask the personnel attorney about that particular thing. But I understand what you're saying. If it's already been made out there to the public, then it should be given to you all for consideration without having to ask them for permission.
I think Courtney is correct, and we'll finalize this, but I think the issue is this is a twofold consideration, right? By all means, you have a right to get anything that's public record, right? You have the right to review it and take a look at it. When you get into trying to inquire of the individual as to why it happened, what they did, that's what needs to be given a waiver, and that's what we need to make sure that they understand what's happening, and they're given the right to do it in private or public. So that's the two separate ways we look at it, Reverend Gibson. So yes, you can look at the information, but when you get into questioning them about it, why they did it, what was the reasoning, what happened, that's the things we need to take into consideration, and they have to be given notice, an opportunity to waive their right to a private discussion. But we'll confirm that.
All right, so again, where we are, review information by Friday afternoon, receive questions by Friday afternoon, compile questions we're going to ask, and make sure we make those questions available to all of the candidates we're going to interview by Sunday. Correct, Ms. Caldwell? Yeah. And then we'll be ready to interview our first candidates on Monday afternoon at 5 p.m. Those first candidates will be local candidates. We will determine at the time on Friday who we're going to interview, and then we'll know how many we're going to interview each day. If we dwindle that number down to 5, we'll just take all 5 candidates on Monday. That's right. If we dwindle it down to 5. And I just want to state for the record, for those who have applied for the position, we are going to do a very thorough process of reviewing the information. And if you applied to be the chief of police of Baton Rouge, you should know those of us who serve on the committee take it serious, and some of what you may have done in the past will come into play. It's just being transparent. It will come into play when we review your personnel records. And at that time, if you are not selected as a candidate, my apologies to you, but we want the best and most efficient and effective individual to serve as the next chief of our city and parish. Anyone else?
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor, just to add to that, to not add any other embarrassment to them, right? Because I know all of the good media folks around here. I see my man Perry over there. He going back to his office and put in those requests tonight. Am I right, Perry? Yeah, so just to not put them in that position, you know?
Mm-hmm. And you want to protect the guilty or the innocent, whichever they might be, but ultimately we want to thoroughly vet all of the candidates who offered themselves up for service. And as we've had this discussion today, one of the things that has come into question is whether or not those candidates have been involved in activities that we feel would prevent them from serving in this capacity. So that is going to come up. So I want to state again, Friday emails, generally speaking to the public, you can send those emails to BRPD chiefquestions@brla.gov. You can start sending those emails this evening at the conclusion of this meeting. I'm told BRPD chiefquestions@brla.gov. You have until Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock to submit those questions and comments, and then we'll compile the questions and make them available to the candidates by Sunday afternoon. And so all candidates will have the questions we're going to ask. We still will need to discuss how many questions we're going to ask. Each one of us of the 7-member committee who are here are going to ask at least one question, but we'll discuss based on the number of candidates whether or not we ask more than that. All right. Anything else, Mr. President? Public comment is going to be held at the end of the meeting, but today, public comment, is there anyone here wishing to speak on the item? And the item is the selection or the process of selecting the next chief of police. Is there anyone here wishing to speak on the item? For today's meeting, you'll have 3 minutes to speak, and we'll notify you when the time starts and when that time ends. So is there anyone here wishing to speak on the item? Showing none, we go back now to the committee members. Anyone wishing to speak? Yes, sir.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm still confused about how we're going to make the decision on the 21. If we're meeting and starting the interview process on Monday, at what point are we going to decide which of the 21, or if all of the 21 are on the list?
Any suggestions, Mayor Broom? My suggestion would be that we're going to have to meet again prior to. And maybe we'll have to meet again on Friday afternoon very quickly. If we set the time Friday to review all of the information about 3 o'clock and compile the questions by 3 o'clock, maybe we can meet here Friday afternoon if this facility, the chamber is open. I'm sure it will be. Mayor Broom?
That shouldn't be a problem as long as the chamber is available. If it's not available, we'll have to look at another location, and then it will be our responsibility to make a public notice. And so that gives us enough time to make a public notice so people will know.
So Friday, can everybody be here Friday at 4 o'clock? We'll reconvene Friday at 4 o'clock. At that time, we'll decide on the questions. We'll decide on the candidates. And then those candidates will know the questions at that time. All right.
Yeah, Friday is not a good time for me, Friday at 4 o'clock.
Won't you zoom in or something?
Okay, yeah, I can do that.
That's why we got alternates.
Yeah.
All right, but will you have an opportunity to review all the questions by then?
Yeah.
And get with the parish attorney's office so you can review those files as well.
Right.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
So just for our sake and for any members of the public who may want to submit questions, and this might be a question for the parish attorney as well, considering the limits on what we might be able to ask about what happened in relation to personnel records, is there anything similar with what we can inquire about
Good
as
question.
to work, or what happens if there's, for example, any particular incidents or officers that individuals might have been involved with, that kind of thing?
Question for you, Courtney.
I think you're going to probably be restricted to ask about other individuals that were involved in the incident, because the same is going to hold true for that other individual. It doesn't matter that you all are doing this for the purpose of interviewing someone. If you are in a public meeting setting and you're going to start delving into anyone's, character, questions about their physical and mental health capacities, it's going to lend to anyone else that you might want to inquire about. So if you find out something and you want to ask about that other person too, then you're going to have to give them written notice to say, we're going to talk about you. We have some questions. You have to give them written notice as well. And they could say no. So
does that apply to any questions? So to give an example, if for some reason we wanted to ask one of the current members of BRPD if they had any involvement with, say, Jason Acree, the officer who was dismissed as a member of the narcotics division, would we need that consent from him, or would we just have to limit ourselves in what we could ask?
yeah, it's going to depend on the question. And you may know ahead of time, you may not know, and you may know what you want to ask. You're not going to know what the other members of your committee is going to ask. So you will have to probably just measure and temper it as you go, to make sure you're not crossing that line.
Well, sounds like we may have to pre-submit questions to the parish attorneys to make sure that we are within legal parameters for asking these questions. Because I'm like this young man here, because I've been around BRPD. I know the type of things that they would do or have done, and it might just pop up in my mind right when I sit down and the questions are asking.
Yeah, we're not opposed to having that discussion. It's not 4 or more at once. We can take a look at the questions that y'all might start asking. But
You'll be here Friday, right? Or someone from the parish attorney's
Yeah.
office will be here Friday at 4 o'clock as we begin to compile the questions to kind of help us work through what's appropriate and what's not.
yes, sir. Yes,
Great.
sir.
I
Because
think
now I'm
the-
trying to think if, and I know what you're saying, like give it to us ahead of time.
Right.
I'm trying to think through whether or not that's the best route, or if just discussing it out in the open. I'm always going to be the person to say, do it in the form that it needs to be done in.
Well, I can tell you based upon just town hall meetings with candidates running for office, make sure the flow flows. We require those questions be submitted to us in advance. Mm-hmm. So therefore, there's no questions, everything kind of flows. So I'm fine with that to make sure that we maintain timeliness and a date that we need to get to.
Yes, sir.
And I think the first thing, first order of business on Friday is going to be to determine who we're going to interview of the 21 candidates. That is going to drive how many questions we actually ask. Go ahead.
And so my clarity is 3 o'clock, we review the information that we may receive. Then at 4 o'clock, we convene to discuss that information that we review. Is that?
Well, from 8 a.m. to 3 o'clock, I'm hoping the parish attorney's office will make the information available for us to review. Starting this evening at the conclusion of this meeting, we'll start receiving questions. And I'm hoping Dante will make those questions available to us as we receive them so that we can begin to review those questions between now and Friday. And then by 3 o'clock on Friday, we will have review questions and perhaps come to the table with questions we want to ask. And then we all will discuss at 4 o'clock who we want to interview. And so at the conclusion of the meeting on Friday, we will have the number of people we're going to interview, the questions we're going to ask, and then notify those individuals of who's going to be interviewed first. And if it's not everyone, we may interview everyone on Monday. Go ahead.
Is it too late to maybe change our deadline for questions from 3 o'clock to noon on Friday? Because that way, whoever in the office has time to compile and we have time to get them by 3. I think at 3 o'clock, for us to meet at 4 o'clock might be tight. If we could say noon, that might give us a little more time.
I'm fine with noon. Is everyone else fine
I'm
with
fine
noon?
with
I'm
noon.
fine with noon. Noon it is. High noon Friday. Questions submitted. I'm talking to the general public now. Please submit your questions for any of the candidates for Chief of Police of East Baton Rouge Parish, City of Baton Rouge by noon Friday to the email BRPD Chief Questions at brla.gov. So please send those questions by noon on Friday. We do have a member of the public who wants to ask the questions. Ms. Bester, come on down.
Good evening, everybody. I tried to sit down. I couldn't. I just couldn't. I commend you on this process. I do have concern because one of the things that we've heard throughout, especially with Chief Paul's tenure, is transparency and accountability. Transparency and accountability. I think, and I, as an attorney, I understand the concerns of the parish attorney's office and the things that can and cannot be discussed publicly. But I am very concerned that these interviews be thorough and that the questions that need to be asked, that you have the ability to ask them. I don't know if that's a waiver from those people who want to be interviewed, because they need to know that these interviews are going to be thorough. We trust them with the lives of the citizens of this parish, of this city. And I don't think that there's any question in terms of their history that should be off limits because it's about public safety.
Thank you, Ms. Bester. Anyone else from the committee with any thoughts, questions, or comments? Yes, sir.
One more question. We're being asked to submit one question each, is that correct? Or will we submit as many as we want and we'll sort through that?
I think on Friday we'll meet and you can submit as many as you like, and then, as you said, I think there are going to be some duplications of questions, and then we'll narrow them down based on the number of candidates we have and the amount of time we have. I mean, I don't think we want to ask 50 questions of each candidate. However, I do think we want to ask the questions we all agree are most desirable to be asked of the candidates, and learn the information we want to learn from each candidate in terms of how they best plan to serve the city. And then I think also, as I'm thinking, we got to think about, we're going to give each candidate an opportunity to make an opening statement, right? You know, so they may take 4 to 5 minutes to make an opening statement and say whatever they choose to. And then I think also, if memory serves me, we reserve the right at the time of their comments to ask them questions about anything they may have said in their opening comments. We ask them all the same exact question, but based on some of the comments they made in their opening statement, we reserve the right to ask them questions, follow-up questions about that, if I remember correctly. So all of those things will come into play. But to answer your question, yes, submit as many as you want, and then we'll work together to narrow it down to the ones we want to ask based on the number of candidates we're going to interview.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Yes.
My question
Matthews.
is about the 5 selected. Is there a longer interview process for those individuals once the committee comes up with those 5 folks?
Mayor Brew, because we're sending those 5 names to you, correct?
So the committee will give me 5 names, and then I'll take it from there and set up interviews with those 5 people.
All right. Mr. Gibson.
The mayor laid out an outline of some issues that she wanted to make sure that the search committee covers. If she could give a synopsis of that, so we make sure that those type of questions are included, in the interviews. Okay.
I can certainly provide those to you in writing.
All right. Any other questions, concerns, thoughts, ideas for the good of the order? Yes, sir.
So this would depend on Friday, but is something we might want to consider at that point forming maybe like a questionnaire to send to all of the candidates if there are certain questions that could be answered with a yes, no, or brief explanation. Maybe I'm thinking too much in like character and fitness because we had to do that as 2Ls this year, but that seems to be a way that might kind of streamline things and could even help the members of the committee realize, well, let's not focus on this. They've said yes to this. Let's get an explanation.
I'm open to it all. I like the suggestion, and I think it's something for us to consider as we make a decision on Friday. Because again, that might narrow it down. We can send a questionnaire to these folks, to the candidates, and they answer these questions, yes or no, and then we actually ask these questions on the record, and then make public their answers to those questions that we send to them. And perhaps before interviews begin on Monday, we can have that information back typed up and say the candidate A answered questions this way, and then make that available to the public so they know how they responded to those to those questions, which in turn would mean that those candidates had an opportunity to answer even more questions. All right, so I like it. Yeah, they doing a good job. Where you go to law school?
LSU.
Yeah, doing a good job over there. All right, anyone else? Anyway, well, at this time, we're going to close our committee meeting, and I'll see you all on Friday at 4 o'clock. I think, Dennis, if you're listening, you make that Friday 4 o'clock meeting public so the public can stay informed on decisions we're making relative to the selection of the next chief of police of Baton Rouge. Thank you. Meeting adjourned. Excuse me. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, motion to
A
adjourn.
motion to adjourn, second by Mike.
Yeah.
Any objections? Having none, meeting is adjourned.